Well, hi. Welcome to the video lecture on the GDP, and basically, actually, this is GDP and growth because I have actually changed the structure of my lecture a little bit. I'm going to talk on the CPI in a later chapter. So basically, we will see in this chapter GDP, which is gross domestic product or the production level in a country produced by all producers, measured, of course, with prices, which means actually those products should have a price. If products don't have a price, they are not included in GDP. And also growth, which is basically the growth of the production level in a country or in an economic system. We should mention that GDP is a very important indicator. Actually, it might be considered as the most important indicator in the economic system. You might heard a lot of inflation and things like that, but basically, one main thing most people are looking for is whether a country is growing or not growing, or whether a country is in depression or not. When people look to that, they look to the growth rate. So, in order to have a healthy economy, you need the production level continuously increase, not stay stable, but increase. So you should have an increasing production level to have a healthy economic system. And here with the growth rate, we are pretty much mentioning growth of GDP or gross domestic product. Maybe I should mention there is one alternative, which is gross national product, basically. Gayri safi milli hasla in Turkish, for the Turkish students. I would like to say the parallel Turkish word. That means the gross national product, which includes what the agents of nation outside of the country produce, including, for example, foreign businessmen, foreign workers who are Turkish citizens but produce outside, which is maybe a little bit difficult because, especially for example, in Germany, there are many Turkish citizens who are actually producing, contributing to the production, basically. But at the same time, they are also German citizens, for example. So, which are they contributing to the gross national product of Turkey or Germany? That might be a problem. And of course, if you were to calculate the gross national product of Turkey, you should basically subtract the things that are produced in Turkey, however, produced by foreign agents in Turkey. And here, actually, there might be some difficulty. I mean, if there's a Turkish factory in Turkey, Turkish workers go there, but foreign company has actually opened the factory. How would you measure basically what portion of the production is produced by the foreign company and what portion of the production is produced by the Turkish workers? But we will see. There's a possibility of basically understanding that. But mainly in the gross domestic product, you measure the production level, production that is done inside the borders of the company by nation or foreign agents. And in the United States, GDP is used more. In Turkey, for a while, gross national product was used more. Basically, probably, gross national product in Turkey was a little bit higher because of the foreign workers working in other countries. So we will see. We will see the logic of the way GDP is calculated. But before going into that, I had two videos, but I have taken one out because one of them is good enough. This is actually a video where people discuss whether there could be how well GDP is a measurement to measure, especially the overall well-being of a society. Because, well, we have said GDP is measuring the production level, and that production level is important for the health of the economy. But in time, GDP was also used to some extent to measure the well-being of the whole nation. So if GDP is low, the nation is in depression, and that's a bad thing. And that means the nation is experiencing a very a case where their well-being is threatened. If a nation is growing, that is considered as a very good thing for their well-being. But the question here becomes, how well is GDP in measuring the well-being at the beginning, basically? And that's the question that is asked here, basically. And also, people are asking whether there could be some alternatives to GDP to measure that well-being. And I said the GDP is measuring the production level, and there actually it is looking what is having the price, what is actually being sold in the market. Basically, the alternative measures mostly. Well, there was a Marxian alternative measure where basically part of the production is taken as unproductive and taken out of GDP, and there is another alternative which is actually more recent alternative compared with Marxian alternative, where actually they put certain measures into the GDP. In both cases, in the second case especially, you need to find the price of what you put in, because what you put in doesn't have a price, so you need to calculate kind of an artificial price, which still, according to that view, basically is equal to the cost of an action or a product in the society. But anyway, so that's the second measure, which is called GPI. I might talk a little bit in the background part on these two measures, and maybe one more alternative of it. But let's start with the background before we do that. So, GDP. The concept itself was developed by Simon Kuznets. This is the guy. He is known for the Kuznets curve for another reason. Actually, that's the impact of the economic development on inequality, which is according to him. As economy develops, first the nations become more unequal, and then they become more equal. It's like typical Kuznets relation is when development occurs, first things go worse in certain sense, but then they go better. But in terms of inequality, first people become more unequal and then become more equal as development progresses. But also you have an environmental Kuznets, for example, where first environment degrades, but then it goes better when economic development increases. But Kuznets, its maybe most important contribution is he created the first GDP accounting. I mean, he calculated GDP for the United States. That has happened at the time of the Great Depression, where the nation wanted to know how well it was doing. And Kuznets actually had not only calculated the GDP of, actually he has done it in the 1934, but he also calculated GDP not only for that year, but also all the way back to 19th century, actually almost mid-19th century. And after 1947, as you can see on the slides, the GDP started to be calculated yearly. And after 1952, this UN started to publish international GDP tables for the whole world. So for the whole world, this started to be calculated. So if you ever look at economic data, you can GDP is one you can find easily. Although the difficulty exists mostly for the countries which have been reunited or basically separated after 1952 mainly. Still, for some of them, the data is considered unreliable, but still, for most countries, you can find GDP data. It's one of the one of the variables you can very easily to find. Which is very easy, one of the variables which is very easy to find, basically. So, as I said, this is Kuznets' most important contribution, especially considering that this one variable has become the one variable which is the most important, considered as the most important variable. Well, the logic of GDP, which we will see in detail, but basically, you at all production level, but how do you sum them up? You need to give them a value. Each of them should have a value, and that value is equal to the market price. This has some difficulties, and we will see how those difficulties will be solved, but mainly this means everything produced in the market will have a value that resembles the market gives to it. But as I said, according to Marxian economists, some of things that are produced in the market actually are not productive, are not adding to the production. They have value, but actually that value doesn't mean production has increased. One example is, for example, the groceries, the supermarkets, they are adding, they actually are storing the goods and selling those goods to the people. And basically, actually, while they store the goods, so they just provide a service which is kind of getting product from the producers and giving it to the people who are using that product. So the producer itself cannot do it, because when someone goes to a supermarket, he or she can see everything he or she wants to buy. While if I go to just a milk producer, then I can only buy milk. Then I should go to someone who's selling olives, and I will buy olives. But in the end, according to Marxian sense, okay, this makes it easier for me, the buying process easier for me. So it has an importance, but it doesn't increase the production level. In the end, what I want is milk and olives. So I only need to, for me, production level only increases if I can get more milk and olives. Well, and those supermarkets, okay, they might be useful if they can increase the amount of milk and olives I can get with the lowest possible cost. So if they can decrease the cost for me to getting those milk and olives, that's good. They have certain purposes, but they by themselves don't add value to the production process, basically. So that's why they should be subtracted according to subtracted from the GDP according to Marxian sense. And there are other types of services like that. So Marxian countries, in the Cold War, they had their own measurement, which was called net material product (NMP). Well, the other critique of GDP was GPI, which is basically, as I said, there are certain byproducts of the consumption, like pollution, degradation of the environment, for example, or crime, or health diseases. So those costs should be subtracted from GDP, because that's the harm caused by the production. And there are some types of production, like volunteering, housework, which is not part of GDP. They should be added to the GDP according to this logic. So with those additions and subtractions, you create a new measurement, which is called GPI, Gross Linear Progress Indicator. A third alternative is actually to measure the well-being of the countries. You add to GDP another two measurements. Actually, use GDP per capita, you divide GDP to the population, and you add to GDP, actually multiply those numbers. The average health length in a country, and the average education level, the year of education, basically is used for that. So that way, this measurement is considered as a better measurement to measure the well-being of the nations. Here, actually, we are not using other indicators by turning them to the prices. Rather, we basically use them with their own, let's say, units. So this is GDP, and this is basically some alternative measurements of GDP. Next time we will see we will also go over background information on growth. But we are close to 15 minutes mark, so see you next time, in next part, basically.